Hello, everyone. My name is Katy Perry. Yes, that's my real name. Don't worry about it. Welcome to Who Run the World, a women's podcast. I created this podcast series to discuss the different aspects of womanhood. I wanted to take an intersectional approach to this topic and try to educate myself about these issues, as well as sharing these conversations with all of y'all who are listening. Today, I'm talking to my friend Lauren about women and privilege. We are two white women talking about white privilege, and I know that it's problematic in its own right. I want to acknowledge that and also acknowledge that there is validity in this conversation. We talk about how we try to be aware of our privilege and check our privilege and the processes and learning that we've done to come to this point. And I am trying to make this podcast intersectional. However, in this episode, we mostly just talk about race. This one's mostly limited to that just for time. I really wish we could have included so many more identities, though. And honestly, this episode is a bit rambly, and I knew that would happen because this topic is so complex. But I think it's really authentic, and I think it's really good to listen to because you kind of see us stumbling around, and I think that's what these conversations are, and it's real. So shout out to Lauren for being open to these kind of conversations. She's wonderful. I love her. And here we go. Girls, who run the world, girls, who run the world, girls, who run this Okay. Are you Snapchatting this?
Of course.
Okay. So today is about women and privilege. I have my beautiful, lovely, smart person, roommate, Lauren Schall here. And I thought she'd be a really good person to talk to about this because we're roommates and we have these kind of conversations all the time. She's very intelligent and very aware, and she makes me think about a lot of things. So I think I should share that with the world.
It's an honor to be here.
Perfect. Okay, well, Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Lauren Schall. I'm a fourth-year student at CSU, and I'm studying communications. I have a minor in ethnic studies and a minor in sociology, and I love talking about privilege, white privilege, and kind of talking about just social justice issues and how it affects everyone and how we all are participants in racism, pretty much.
Cheery topic.
Yes.
Very cheery. And how do you identify?
So I am cisgender female, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Yeah, that's me.
Perfect. So basically we're going to be talking about our privilege, the privileges we hold, and how we check them.
Okay.
It's not very formal, but for me, I was going to talk about my upbringing, and start with that because I'm from Seattle. So I kind of thought that I was very cultured and not sheltered, and
I grew up in San Francisco. I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I was I understand I live in that bubble, but I am more in tune with the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's definitely what I thought. And then I kind of came here to CSU, and just kind of the conversations I was having and the people I was meeting, I was kind of very unaware of how white my childhood was, and it was very liberal, very progressive, which is great. But yeah, definitely kind of not as much as I thought it was. And so that's been really interesting for me to realize I did grow up in a white neighborhood. Seattle is known for diversity, but I did not experience that as a child. And so that's pretty interesting. And same with I was well, I know about all the gay stuff, politics and all that stuff because I know a lot of gay people, I have a lot of gay aunts and stuff like that. Yeah. But it was still a lot of white gay people in my life. So there wasn't that intersectionality aspect. That was interesting. And even with gender, I think I was in gender and race. I remember in high school, I was pretty why can't we all get along? Very colorblind. We should
I don't see color.
Yeah, I don't
see difference. I treat everyone the same.
I think I definitely was like that. And I remember being well, I like women's rights, but I'm not a feminist. That word's really aggressive. My mom being okay, let's wait a couple of years.
Is your mom a feminist?
Oh, absolutely. And
I don't know if my mom would identify as
really.
I mean, I'm sure she would. She's very progressive in terms of her business and being a woman and being strong. But I don't think she would take a political stance on women's rights.
Yeah.
Or just,
Yeah, well, I was talking to my mom over winter break this year, and she was yeah, I hate when I hear those women saying well, I'm not a feminist. I just want to smack them. And I'm Mom, that's what I was in high school. She was I wanted to smack you, but I thought I'd just wait a couple of years, and look, you turned out great. I was thanks, Mom. But yeah, so that's totally true. So I think it's interesting, because we also have that in common of the whole very liberal, very progressive, but how limited is that in itself, which is not talked about enough.
And how do you check someone's privilege?
Yeah.
And like for your mom, she's like, this is my daughter. Like,
yeah, she's like, I'm just going to wait it out.
Yeah,
that's
like,
her
someone
her
else
reaction.
will teach her. Or
Yeah.
like, when will you learn? And I think I came to college and I was like, yes, I lived in a little suburb outside of San Francisco, and I was like, no, like, everyone lives in the bubble in my town called Pleasanton, which is just problematic in itself. But I was like, no, but I'm well-rounded. I'm sophisticated. And then I came to college and I was like, wow. I think that's really my first notion was like, okay, okay, I'm doing this. Like, I'm going to a predominantly white university. Like, I probably won't be faced with too many challenges of my privilege. And then my first semester was just an incredible journey of learning and just decolonizing my mind.
Good vocabulary. I like that. So do you want to talk about how that first started? Do you have like a catalyst moment, or was it more gradual? Or
well, okay, so it was a part of Key Communities, which is an incredible. Let me just put that little in there.
To plug it. Yeah.
Key Communities, which is just a diverse live and learning community, and I lived in G2 of Corbett Hall. Shout out to all my G2 lovers. And I just had these two twins who lived across the hall, Junior Crawford and James Crawford, and they were so like I honestly they could bring me to tears. Like I absolutely love them. They were just so patient, so kind, and I had ethnicity in the media.
Okay.
With Junior Crawford, and we would go every morning. We'd kind of have discussions. Then we'd go to the 50-minute class and then kind of have a discussion on the way back to Corbett. And just through those kind of conversations and explaining and me being like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that like in movies, in like TV shows, like the stereotypes are perpetuated and that like white males are the lead roles. And then they have their side like kicks who are the supportive or the groupies who are then the roles that are played by like African Americans, Blacks, Asians, Latinos. So I was like, I think that was kind of like my first thing. And we watched Men in Black, which was like, that was like
one of my favorite movies. No shame.
And that's kind of like where, and we saw Crash, the movie. And we just kind of picked apart and just kind of loosely talked about those kind of discussions. And then just in Corbett, we every single night, like you just put a bunch of 18-year-olds who lived in different neighborhoods, had different situations growing up. And then we just talked about like, what is an average day for homecoming for you? And then comparing that to Kat Connolly, Kat in the club, Kat in the Cadillac, whatever you call her, another incredible person. And I mean, we just talked, we compared notes and we talked about just kind of how we grew up and what that looks like and how that shapes why we are here today. And I think that there was a lot of pivotal moments and a lot of like, and I had a lot of shame that I didn't want to talk about race. I didn't want to talk about like class. I didn't want to talk about, because I was ashamed and I felt like I was naive and I hated the feeling of not knowing. I hated the feeling of me thinking like my first year, I'm 18, me feeling like, well, yes, I was privileged and I grew up in a like incredible household that had a lot of income. And I was like, okay, so yes, I was on the high end, but like, I think like the average salary was like $70,000 a year. And when I dropped that number, 70,000, everyone's like, oh my gosh. And it kind of put it into perspective.
Like, this is what you think.
Yes. And I was like, no, I thought that was a conservative estimate. And through all the moments of me feeling like dumb or uneducated, or me just feeling like, oh my gosh, like, Lauren, you're not fitting in. Like, you are ostracized because you aren't understanding. I then became an ethnic studies major, and I was like, I will try to prevent as many of these moments as possible. And I will try to learn as much, and I will try to listen as much. And I think that was that is one of the biggest lessons I've learned is listening. And I'm still getting better at it. As CP would be like, oh, Katy Perry.
That's me.
Would just be like, you need like stop talking over people and listen. And there is like a huge value of listening.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I still feel like I'm working on that. And that's like another thing that we've talked about before with like, especially with like white feminism and like, so like how, because we both identify as white, like how we play into the like feminist community and like women of color and how like when all these people come in those spaces, who talks the loudest? It's usually the white, like, women. You know, you can apply that with everything. Like, you get a marginalized group together, there's still a hierarchy within the group, and so there's still going to be louder voices. So I think that both you and I have been like, well, how do we become more aware of that and decide, do we need to make a change or not? And sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. I don't know. Like, I had a really interesting conversation at Leadership. It's like a leadership retreat. And you kind of get really aware of, like, your leadership style. And so I kind of became aware of how dominant I am in groups. And I was, like, pretty self-conscious of that. And then a lot of people were giving me feedback, mostly guys. And they were saying, you know, like, well, like, you need to be more, like, inclusive or whatever.
Of course the guys are the ones like, you know what, women, we need to check our privilege.
Yeah, I mean, there's merit.
Kidding.
There is merit to that. And then one of my friends was like, honestly, one of my women friends was like, honestly, like, yes, like, you can, you know, become more aware of your leadership style, but you are going to get more flack if you're acting the exact same way as a man, like, because you're going to be seen as bossy or whatever. So I was like, that was really interesting because it was really validating to be like, you are a woman and, like, you're going to be looked down on for being, like, this, like, leader role. So there's some resistance to that, but you can't just end the conversation there, because then what about the women of color who are probably talking even less, and or, like, you know, people who have any other marginalized identities. But yeah, so that's, like, interesting to balance that, kind of becoming aware of this, try to validate myself, and then also keep going in that like, that thought process, I guess.
I agree. I take up a lot of room, and like, I take up a lot of space in a room. And when I feel like I'm holding back and, like, trying to allow for other people's voices, I honestly feel like other people don't take up that space. And so instead of me, like, encouraging others to speak up on their behalf, I, like, just take the space back, and I'm like, you know what, I'll fill it. And so at the Women's Day conference, they were like, white feminism is all about steamrolling. Yeah. And I was like, no, you go get that steamroll. Like, sometimes people need to know. Yeah. And I think that's something I'm still working on.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And I'm not perfect.
Yeah. No, it's hard. Yeah. Because, like I said, it's the whole, like, balancing, like, well, I want to, you know, not validate myself, but that should not be mutually exclusive with invalidating others.
Or I should not always validate myself and always be like, well, Lauren is perfect. Yeah. Lauren needs to advocate for herself. Lauren needs to take up this space with her opinion. Oh, yeah. That doesn't have any backing or substance to it in this moment.
Yeah. Well, that's, like, my, like, instincts. Like, I'm just kind of, if there's a group, I'm going to start talking. And then it's, you know, it's just interesting how we kind of got there, I guess. Like, how we have the confidence to do that. And part of that is, like, all of our identities. But yeah, I don't know, that's interesting. I feel like when I was first learning about, like, privileges they hold, all this stuff, like, freshman year, definitely it was, like, freshman year. It was great. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm a feminist. Like, I, like, want to be, like, I want to work to be, like, a queer ally. I want to work to be, like, you know, like, the people of color community, like, ally, like, all these things.
But the whole, like, ally.
Yeah.
And getting checked on that of, like, you're not necessarily an ally. Like, you cannot identify yourself as an ally. Yeah. Someone within that community has to identify you.
Absolutely.
And with, like, APO and that notion of alliness. And
yeah, like, we were, both me and Lauren were in a co-ed service fraternity, and there was
inclusive co-ed service fraternity.
Yes. And we both loved it, but we're both not in it now, for, like, multiple reasons. But one of them was because there was kind of issues with the queer community and how they, like, lost their safe space.
Because cisgendered heterosexual members came in and said they no longer want to be affiliated with the queer community.
Yeah, and so I don't think it was anything coming from hate, but it was coming from ignorance. Absolutely.
Ignorance and a lack of ability to communicate effectively how they were feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very not good communication going on there. But that was one of the, like, the moments where I realized, like, oh, well, I do hold this privilege, and, like, oh, like, I don't have to think about these things unless I'm actively trying to, where other people have to think about this every minute of every day. But I don't know, so that was interesting. Yeah, because, like you said, with the allies, there were a lot of, like, heterosexual people who were like, well, I'm an ally. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not being harmful. And then being called out on that and being like, well, you are. Like, just because you have that label, no matter where you got it, maybe you gave it to yourself as an ally.
If you choose to be a bystander, you are choosing the side of the oppressor.
Yeah.
The oppressor. Yes.
Yeah, it's really complicated. And so I think I was definitely one of those people where I was like, well, I'm an ally. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm great. I, like, support this community. What are you talking about? And then I had to be called out and be like, you're not doing much work, and you, like, are just kind of giving yourself this ally label, and you have like more to do, which is great. You can't be an ally, but you can have a lot more work to do. Right now you're an advocate, which is great. Whatever.
Or you're just a friend.
Yeah.
And there's a valuable like part of just being a friend.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I don't know. I think there was a lot of stuff like that, like freshman year of me figuring that out and being like, it's not as simple as I thought it was. Like, it's not just like, well, I support marriage equality. Like, of course I like support all the gay issues. Like, well, that's one of many, 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 and that's like me and Shelby talked about, our other roommate. Me and Shelby talked
Shelby
about,
Thomas, what up?
Shout out. We talked about in our episode about like, like we have the representation of like gay people. And then a lot of people are left out of that, because gay people are usually like gay, like white cis men. And so then I think I was kind of freshman year, I kind of had that point of view of like, well, I like support marriage equality.
My best friend's gay.
Yeah. And so like
problematic statement in itself.
And so I think that's like one of the first steps, but it's definitely a lot more way to go. And I would say same with like white feminism. I think I definitely was like, obviously not consciously, but I was very like feminism, like we're all women and we're all like trying to do this thing together. And then I wasn't consciously like noticing like all the differences and all the hierarchies and all those things.
But I feel like I don't like validate myself as being a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
what do you mean?
I just say like, oh, I don't know enough. Well, I'm not like a women's studies major. So
yeah,
like, yes, like I think women should have an equal pay as their counterparts. But I don't feel like I know enough to be a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the concept of enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's the concept that I will always be kind of delving with. Like, am I educated enough? Like, am I... Is this important enough for me to be taking up this space and talking? Like, like, am I qualified enough for this whole talk right now?
Yeah.
Just walking in and being like, okay, Lauren, like, women in privilege, like, how do you fall into that?
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
Like,
and
can I talk about this? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's super real. Like
and having two white, like, women talking about this issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're open for
problems in it itself. Put it in the comments.
Yes. Please put it in the comments.
Check our privilege for us.
Yes. Feel free. Always asking for feedback.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's kind of a lot of it. Like, you know what? You do have a lot of a privilege, but understanding feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that I constantly ask for is, where do I stand with you? Like, how am I being perceived right now? Like, have I offended you?
Mm-hmm.
Is there some place where is there some aspects of what I'm saying that is problematic? Like, let's discuss this out, and I'm completely open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I like our house, because I feel like we have like discussions like this all the time, and we're always calling each other out, and it's really comfortable because we're all like really close. But it's like those situations are not common in the real world, and I wish they were, because I wish someone would be able to call me out more. But that's also me saying do the work for me when I should be going and seeking it myself. There's a lot going on. I kind of knew this would happen. I kind of knew we would easily like devolve into like, I don't know, like it's hard. But I think it's a good conversation to have and for other people to hear. But we just kind of commit to being clueless and trying. And I think that's important.
Always trying.
And
sometimes you need to try harder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or like, okay, so this is kind of a topic I want to talk about when I was reflecting on women in privilege and what that looks like, and having two white women discussing this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I was like reflecting, like, when are places where I have been given like leeway or like, oh, well, Lauren didn't know better. And I definitely got a lot of that freshman year. It was nice because I got, because people provided me feedback of like, Lauren, that is blatantly racist, or like, Lauren, like, you need to check yourself.
Yeah.
Or, Lauren, honestly, go reflect on what you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But then also so much kindness of like, when I am crying because I'm realizing my privilege and I don't know how to understand it. Or
white guilt tears.
Yes, white guilt tears running down my face. There's also this support system who is like, but we know who, like, Lauren, we know who you are. And that kind of subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those people are the ones who should get all the credit.
Oh, yeah.
Is the Junior Crawfords, the James Crawfords, the Catherine Connollys, the Gabby Perez. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Those people were so important, and they were such best friends, and honestly have created such a great space for me. I give a lot of the credit to those people and all of the people who have been great facilitators.
Yeah, I think it's like you need those spaces to like be an asshole and make mistakes, and then you also have to acknowledge that you're taking up that space, and it's like for the sake of you learning, which is not always the best for the space that you're in. I don't know, it's so complicated. It's cool though. It's cool.
But then I became an ethnic studies major, and then I got high fives.
But I mean, that's the whole like seeking it out, like seeking out the information instead of making others bring it to you, kind of thing. I don't know. But yeah, like when in APO, when we were having all those discussions about it, about like the queer community, like safe spaces and like allyship and stuff, I had a moment where I was like, I think I was crying, and I was just like, I like want to help you. Like, what can I do for you? Like, I don't understand. Like, I'm the one who's in the wrong. Like, tell me what to do. Like, I'm so mad. And then one of our friends very nicely was like, well, it's not our job to teach you necessarily. Like, we can play a part in it, but that's one of the problems in the oppressing is that you were saying, I'm the oppressor. Tell me what to do. Like, that's the whole, like, putting it on someone else instead of turning it on yourself and doing the work. And so then I, like, left and, like, did some research, like, online and, like, read books, went to the resource centers and stuff like that. And I wish I did that more now.
You don't need to be my white savior. You don't need to be my male savior.
Yeah.
You don't need to be my dominant identity savior.
Yeah.
You need to be right next to me and be like, that sucks.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
sucks. And what are we going to do?
Yeah. That's still, it's so hard. I don't know.
I hope y'all are enjoying this.
Oh, God. Well, I do have another question. If you'd like to be a little bit more structured.
Yes.
So, Lauren,
was that just one question?
Well, yeah, that was part one. And that kind of encompassed a lot of the questions I had on there. But one of them I was going to ask about you being in the PLCs, and if you want to explain what that is. So, like, MGC is multicultural. What is it called? Sorority and fraternities?
Multicultural Greek Council.
Okay. And
then I'm in Pi Lambda Chi Latina Sorority Incorporated.
Yes. And so that's interesting because Lauren is a white person in a Latina sorority. Just kind of like how did you first like get involved in MGC stuff?
My freshman year, I attended my first step out, which is when a organization introduces their new members, and I was just fascinated with it all. And I loved the community aspect of they strolled together, they danced together. My freshman year, I attended the new Alpha Kappa fundraising parties at Zaquila's, and I saw Pi Lambda Chi Latina Sorority Incorporated strolling, and I was just like, what? This sounds so fun. Like, and I was the student who was like, oh my gosh, let me go jump in there. Like, I could figure out this dance.
Yeah.
And then like getting pulled back and being like, Lauren, this is not your space.
Yeah.
And like, what a moment, like a moment of like, Lauren, like you don't get to join this success and the celebration of other people's like accomplishments. And you need to work for them as well. And you get to support as being a bystander, but you can't participate fully. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I love Pi Lambda Chi Latina Sorority Incorporated. How do I join them? How do I get to stroll with them? How do I get to dance with them? How do I get that jacket?
Yeah.
And then how do I get that family and that sisterhood? The sisters were constantly together. If you saw one, you saw them all. And I was like, I want that sense of home. And so that is why I was interested in Pi Lambda Chi.
And so you were just seeing them around campus, like, because you were going to MGC events and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I had Jacqueline O'Connor and Leslie Liu, and they were in my hall, G2 of Corbett. And they ended up crossing over into the sisterhood. I was so excited for them. I was like in tears. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. And I'm so proud of them. And then when I came back from a semester abroad, I just kind of knew like this is something I've wanted to do for 3 years. I've talked about it. I've told everyone that I was going to become a sister of Pi Lambda Chi, and this is kind of my last chance to try it out. So I attended some info sessions, and then I crossed over into the sisterhood.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because when I wear the letters Pi Lambda Chi, everyone is like, wait, so you're in PLC, which is like the Latina sorority? Hey, do you mind if I ask, like, do you identify as Latina? And I realized, like, it happens honestly almost every single time I wear my letters. I realized, like, how interesting. Like, I get a choice. Like, I can identify as Latina. You know what I'm trying to talk about? Like,
no.
So people would just assume, or they would be like, oh, where did you come from? Like, those kind of microaggressions. And me, they're like, well, hi, like, oh my gosh, you're in a Latina sorority. Like, do you identify as Latina? So, like, having choice. and not having labels put on me.
And yeah, so instead of being immediately assumed, like, you are not white,
Yes.
so I'm perceiving you as other.
Yes.
So what are you? Then that question.
Yes.
So for you, because you appear white,
yes.
then people are more, do you think, more sensitive about it and more like less othering?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they say like, oh, that's cool. Like, oh, you're cool.
Yeah, like, good job at you.
Yes. And then it's kind of like, oh, it's now trendy.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's real. And I was gonna ask just about the whole joining process. Like, did you have conversations about, like, with yourself or others about, like, I'm a white person coming into this space? Did you have, like, any conversations like that, or did you think about that?
I definitely thought about it in my head, and I don't recall any specific conversations of me asking if it's okay.
Do you think that was bad?
No, because like in the herstory of Pi Lambda Chi, it says that any woman of any color or ethnicity is welcome into the sisterhood, and the only thing that like is needed for a woman to come into the organization is to have an interest in promoting Latino and Latina students in education and to help in community service. Yeah, no, I don't think I consciously talked about it with anyone, because who's supposed to validate me? I mean, who's supposed to be like, you know what, like, based on myself, I say that it's okay.
Yeah,
and definitely. So I think I was okay in myself, and I understood. And I'm still trying to navigate that space of not dominating the space, but also representing the space and not being a bystander.
Well, that was my next question, was like, like, currently navigating it, because I don't know the like makeup. Do the other members, do they all identify as Latina?
So we have 6 members right now, 6 active members, and 3 out of the 6 identify as Latina.
Okay. And so do you have, like, I don't know, like, that's kind of the question. I don't really know the exact question, but like you said, like, navigating that space as like a white person, and like how much space you're taking up, and acknowledging that you're in this like community that's like, you know, very consciously labeled like a Latina community. I don't know. I think that's like an interesting dynamic. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I have a lot of thoughts. I think that I wish that my sisters were in here to discuss this with me, because I think they would provide an interesting dynamic. And if I was to ask a question, I think they'd be like, you know what, like, yeah, there's some things, like, definitely some of my sisters have been like, there's some things I can't bond with you over. Like, there's some things that you will never understand. And when that happens, I say, like, well, I'm open to listening, and like, if you ever need me, I would love like to listen to your stories. And also, like, maybe I haven't gone through the same thing, but I have definitely gone through the emotions of feeling vulnerable, feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling like disenfranchised. I have definitely had struggles in my life, and I'd love to share those with you. But also, I love Mexican food. I love tacos. Like, I love taquitos. Like so it's like this weird space of, and almost like an envy of like, yes, I don't really have like white culture, yes, is the dominant culture, but white culture isn't anything. White culture is appropriated. White culture has picked and choose what we would like from each culture, and appropriated that to become our own. And so then there's kind of jealousy.
Like the cultural concepts that you don't identify with.
Yeah.
Okay.
And wanting them.
And like, it's still interesting because it's like, you can pick and choose some things, and you will probably pick and choose the good things, but you won't be able to pick and choose the oppression or the like microaggressions or like whatever else that comes with like looking like someone who identifies as Latina or something like that. And so I don't know, there's just so much interesting like overlap with like everything that we're talking about. Is like, this is helpful, this is also problematic, this is like taking up too much space and taking like too little space, and like being a bystander and talking for other groups, and there's so much going on. Like I said, I kind of thought we would ramble around and like just explore these things, because I don't know how else to like talk about this. It can't be very structured, you know?
I think it's an everyday thing that it's important to think about. Think about privilege, thinking about how you portray yourself. And like, when you have like white guilt, like, what does that look like to other people? And how are you handling it? Because it's okay to have white guilt. That's okay.
Yeah.
But we need to be then constructive. Yeah. And it's not someone else's responsibility
to comfort you.
To comfort you.
I don't really have like a conclusion. Like, do you have any other thoughts you want to share on this?
I think that we've talked a lot about white women and like what that privilege, the privilege of just being white is.
Mm.
But to take it back to like, well, we are women and there is privilege of being a cisgendered woman, but never say but, always say and. And there's also things that women have to face every single day. And it looks different for each woman in the ways in which their gender is expressed. And I think that this conversation has not talked on all topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
By no means. And it's a conversation that needs to be continued.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, I would say like keeping intersectionality in mind and talking about like, well, I'm like a white woman and that's different from anyone else, like any other woman.
Yes.
And how I'm like
a woman talking
woman.
from
I'm able-bodied, like upper middle class woman, like all of these things. There's just so much.
There's always a matrix of domination or a matrix of oppression.
Yes, I will link to that in the post because that's like a really interesting like topic. That's like
shout out to Nikita Venus.
Yeah, shout out. But that's a really interesting topic that I would definitely recommend learning more, and I need to learn a lot more about that as well. But yeah, do you have any other thoughts? I'm kind of concluding.
If you ever see me, I would love to engage in dialogue.
Well, so I will include some links to some of the stuff we've talked about in the post. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Lauren. I know this conversation is uncomfortable and awesome.
Oh, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not learning.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Bye, y'all.